The first snow came early that year, dancing down from a pewter sky like ash from God's own chimney. Colt Mercer pulled his collar higher against the Wyoming wind and studied the tracks in fresh powder small boots. A child's gait, followed by something heavier. The second set of prints made his jaw tighten. A man's boots, deep and deliberate. Stalking. Blood spotted the snow ahead like scattered garnets. Colt shifted his Winchester across his saddle and urged his mare forward through the skeletal aspens. At 45, he'd seen enough blood to know when someone was hurt bad. The trail led deeper into the canyon, away from Dry Creek's smoke-smudged lights below. No good reason for a child to be out here with night falling and a storm building. The wolves found them first. 3 gray shadows circled a wind-twisted pine where a woman clutched a girl to her chest, swinging a broken branch at the pack. Her coat was torn at the shoulder, blood seeping through wool. The child, maybe 9 years old, pressed against her, eyes wide but not crying. Smart girl. Tears would freeze out here. Colt fired into the air. The wolves scattered like smoke, but he knew they'd circle back. Hungry things always did. "Easy now," he called, dismounting slow. The woman's eyes were wild as any cornered animal's, darting between him and the vanishing wolves. "Name's Mercer. I mean you no harm." "They killed our horse," the woman gasped. Her voice held education despite the terror. "We were trying to reach town when—" She swayed, and Colt caught her elbow before she could fall. "You're bleeding something fierce." He kept his voice level, the way he'd learned to gentle spooked horses. "My cabin's not far. Can you ride?" The woman nodded, though her face had gone the color of old porcelain. The girl tugged at her skirts. "Aunt May, your shoulder." May. The name suited her somehow simple and strong, like prairie flowers that bloomed despite drought. Colt helped them onto his mare, the woman in front and the child behind, then led them through the gathering dusk on foot. Snow began falling harder, erasing their tracks almost as fast as they made them. His cabin squatted against a granite cliff face, built to last with logs thick as a man's waist. Nothing fancy, but the roof didn't leak and the walls kept the wind out. He'd chosen this spot for its isolation after the war, far enough from town that memories couldn't find him easy. Inside, he lit the oil lamp and stoked the banked fire. The woman May slumped into his only chair while the girl hovered close, protective as a mother cat, in the warm light. Colt could see them better. May Calloway, if he placed her right, the schoolteacher's widow, pretty in that refined way Eastern women had, with dark hair coming loose from its pins and eyes the color of strong coffee. The kind of woman who belonged in church socials and lending libraries, not bleeding in a hermit's cabin. "Ren, fetch that kettle," May instructed the girl, who jumped to obey. Even hurt, she kept her authority. "Mr. Mercer, I'm grateful, but we can't impose—" "You can and you will." Colt pulled his medicinal kit from the shelf. "That shoulder needs tending before infection sets in. The storm's fixing to be a bad one." He helped her out of the ruined coat, trying not to notice how she flinched at a man's touch. The wound was a deep gash, likely from a fall against rocks. As he cleaned it, she bit her lip hard enough to leave marks but didn't cry out, tough as whipcord beneath that ladylike exterior. "Why were you out there alone?" He kept his hands steady, professional. The war had taught him field medicine, whether he'd wanted to learn or not. May's jaw worked before she answered. "We weren't alone at first. Luther Pike sent men to discuss business." Luther Pike. Now there was a name that soured milk. The man owned half the territory's mining interests and had his fingers in the rest. Word was he'd married well, then conveniently lost his wife to fever, inheriting her family's claims. His younger brother had done the same, marrying May before dying in a cave-in that folks whispered wasn't entirely accidental. "Pike's got no cause to bother you," Colt said carefully, tying off the bandage. May's bitter laugh said otherwise. He claims Samuel left debts, wants the deed to the copper deposits on my land. When I refused to sign, his men got insistent. So you ran. So I ran. She met his eyes then, and he saw steel there. With Samuel's papers, the real ones, not the forgeries Pike's been waving around. Colt stood slowly, processing this. A widow with proof of Pike's schemes was dangerous as dynamite in a thunderstorm. Pike had Judge Carlton in his pocket and enough hired guns to make anyone disappear. The law in Dry Creek bent whichever way Pike's money blew it. You know he'll come looking. I know. May's hand found Wren's, squeezing tight. But those papers are Wren's future. Samuel made her his heir, not his brother. I won't let Pike steal that. A rifle shot cracked through the night, shattering the window. Colt shoved both females to the floor as glass showered down, his body covering theirs by instinct. Another shot splintered the doorframe. Mercer, a voice called from the darkness. We know they're in there. Send them out and we ride on. No need for blood. Red Sash Thompson. Colt would recognize that whiskey-rough voice anywhere. Pike's favorite enforcer. The kind who'd gut you for $1 and enjoy the work. Best ride on anyway. Colt called back, checking his Winchester's load. Storm's getting worse. Now don't be inhospitable, mister. Pike just wants to talk to the lady. Sort out this misunderstanding all civilized-like. May's fingers dug into Colt's arm. In the lamplight, her face had gone corpse-pale, but her voice stayed steady. He'll kill us both. Wren, too. She's seen too much. Colt studied the woman and child huddled behind his overturned table. He'd wanted no part of town troubles, had built this cabin to escape the weight of other folks' wars. But looking at that little girl's brave face, her small hands fisted in her aunt's skirts, he felt something shift in his chest, like ice breaking on a river. Well then, he said quietly, reckon they'll have to go through me first. He doused the lamp and moved to the window, sighting down his rifle. 3 men that he could see, probably more circling round. The snow was falling thick now, curtaining the night in white. Good for cover, bad for shooting. There's a root cellar, he told May. Trapdoor under the bearskin. Take Wren down there and don't come up no matter what you hear. You can't fight them alone. Done it before. The words came out harder than intended. Go on now. May gathered Wren and found the trapdoor, but paused at the opening. Why are you helping us? Colt kept his eyes on the darkness beyond the window. Why indeed? Maybe because Pike represented everything he'd come here to escape men who used power like a club, who took what they wanted because they could. Maybe because that little girl reminded him of another child, long ago and far away, who'd had no one to stand between her and evil men. Or maybe he was just tired of running from the man he used to be. Ask me if we live through this, he said. May disappeared into the cellar, pulling the trapdoor shut. Colt waited, patient as stone. The war had taught him that too, how to be still when everything in you wanted to move, how to let the enemy make the first mistake. Red Sash obliged. A shadow moved against the snow, creeping toward the side window. Colt fired, and the shadow dropped with a yelp. Return fire peppered the cabin walls, but the logs held firm. That wasn't neighborly. Mercer, Red Sash sounded irritated now. Mister, Pike ain't gonna like this. Mister, Pike can take it up with me, personal. The shooting stopped. In the silence, Colt could hear the wind building, throwing snow against the walls like fistfuls of sand. Then, cutting through the storm, came the sharp ding-ding-ding of telegraph wire. He risked a look through the shattered window. One of Pike's men had climbed a pole, tapping a message on the portable key they'd strung to the main line, calling for reinforcements. No doubt, by dawn, this cabin would be surrounded by every hired gun Pike could muster. But the storm was building too, already thick enough to blur the world beyond 20 feet, the temperature dropping fast enough to freeze a man's fingers to his gun. Pike's men would have to find shelter soon or risk freezing to death. We'll be back come morning. Mercer. Red Sash's voice was already fading into the wind. You think real hard about what side you want to be on. Colt waited until he was sure they'd gone, then pulled May and Wren from the cellar. The girl was shivering but trying to hide it, chin up like a tiny soldier. May's shoulder had started bleeding through the bandage. They'll be back with more men, he said. We need to move before dawn. In this storm, May looked toward the window where snow fell like a solid wall. Better to chance the storm than face Pike's army. He was already gathering supplies ammunition, dried beef, his winter gear. I know these mountains. There's an old line shack about 8 miles up. We can hole up there until the weather clears, then make for Cheyenne. The telegraph. We'll be down by morning if this keeps up. He handed May a coat that would swallow her whole but keep her warm. Pike rules Dry Creek, but his reach ain't infinite. We get you to the federal marshals in Cheyenne. Those papers of yours might actually mean something. May bundled Wren into every spare piece of clothing they could find until the girl looked like a walking quilt pile. As they prepared to leave, she touched Colt's arm. I know who you are, she said quietly. Colt Mercer, the graveyard colonel. They still tell stories. His shoulders stiffened. That man's dead. Maybe. She studied him with those dark, knowing eyes. But I'm glad something of him remains. We'd be dead without it. They slipped out into the storm, 3 shadows against the white. Behind them, the cabin disappeared into the blizzard as if it had never been. Ahead lay miles of killing cold and uncertain refuge. But as Colt broke trail through the mounting drifts, the woman and child following trustingly in his wake, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Not peace that was too much to ask, but purpose. Maybe a reason to push through the cold that went deeper than mere survival. In his pocket, the telegraph key he'd lifted from the pole tapped against his hip. Pike would send his message come dawn. Pike arrives tonight. Let him come, Colt thought, pulling his hat low against the driving snow. By then, they'd be ghosts in the white. And Pike would learn what many had learned before him, that Colt Mercer might have come to Wyoming to bury his past, but he hadn't forgotten how to fight. The storm closed around them like a fist, but somewhere above the clouds, stars still burned. They just had to survive long enough to see them again. The line shack materialized from the storm like a promise kept. 8 miles through hip-deep snow had taken them past midnight, but the small structure stood solid against the wind, just where Colt remembered. He kicked the door open and checked for unwanted guests, human or otherwise, before ushering May and Wren inside. Get a fire going, he told them, heading back into the storm. I need to cover our tracks. By the time he returned, May had kindled a small blaze in the potbelly stove. Wren sat close to it, hands extended toward the warmth. In the flickering light, Colt saw May struggling with frozen buttons, her injured shoulder making every movement painful. Let me, he said quietly, helping her out of the ice-stiff coat. His fingers brushed the edge of her collar, and she stiffened before forcing herself to relax. Thank you, her voice was barely a whisper, for everything. As she settled Wren near the fire with a blanket, Colt noticed her hands shaking, not from cold, from holding back what needed saying. He'd seen that look before, in soldiers carrying intelligence that could turn battles. Might as well tell it, he said, checking his rifle. Whatever's got you running scared enough to brave a killing storm. May pulled Wren close, as if the child's presence gave her strength. It's not just the deed Pike wants. Samuel, my husband, he found something in those copper mines. Not just ore, government surveyor's marks, rails. Colt's hand stilled on his weapon. Railroad survey marks. The transcontinental secondary route. It's supposed to go through Laramie. Everyone knows that. But Samuel found plans for a spur line right through our land. Pike knows. That's why he killed... She caught herself, glancing at Wren. That's why Samuel's death was so convenient. The child looked up at her aunt. Papa didn't fall, did he not, like they said? May's face crumbled for just a moment before she found her steel again. No, sweetheart, he didn't fall. Colt felt the weight of their truth settle on his shoulders. Railroad routes meant fortune or ruin for towns they passed through. Pike would kill 100 men for that kind of information. These papers, he said. Where are they? May's hand went to her bodice, a gesture so quick he almost missed it. Safe. Samuel taught me his cipher before he died. Said if anything happened. She pulled Wren tighter. There's a fragment from Ecclesiastes sewn into my corset lining. The verse numbers are coordinates for a bank box in town, and a lawyer's address in Boston who has copies. Smart man. Colt moved to the window, scraping frost to peer out. Problem is, Pike owns the bank, and the telegraph lines to Boston. I know. May's voice carried exhaustion now. That's why we were trying to leave. But his men were watching the stage depot, the train station. I thought if we could reach the next town. On foot in winter. He turned to study her. This proper Eastern lady had more grit than most soldiers he'd known. That was brave, foolish, but brave. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. My father always said I had more courage than sense. Where is your father now? Dead. Mother, too. Cholera outbreak. 3 summers back. Samuel was all we had left. She smoothed Wren's hair absently. Now it's just us. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Outside, the wind howled like all the demons of perdition were loose. Colt made a decision that would have surprised him a day ago. Come morning, we'll head for Dry Creek. May's head snapped up. That's madness. Pike. We'll expect us to run, hide, maybe make for Cheyenne like I said. He pulled the stolen telegraph key from his pocket. But there's someone in town who might help, if we can get to her before Pike locks everything down. Sheriff Ada Rios. We served together, in a manner of speaking. She was an army nurse before she pinned on the badge. One of the few in town Pike doesn't own outright. A woman sheriff. Wren perked up at this news. Temporary appointment when Sheriff Collins caught a bullet last month. Town council meant it as a joke, but Ada's got their measure. She's holding her own. May considered this. Can she be trusted? With our lives, maybe. With the law, absolutely. Colt fed another log into the stove. Ada believes in justice like some folks believe in scripture. Problem is, justice and law don't always shake hands in Dry Creek. Then why risk it? Because you're right about that bank box. Whatever proof your husband left, Pike will destroy it the moment he knows where to look. We need to get there first, and Ada's the only one with legal authority to open it without the bank president's say-so. The storm began to slacken near dawn. Exhausted from its own fury, Colt stood watch while May and Wren slept, the woman's arm protective around the child even in dreams. He found himself studying May's face in the firelight, the determined set of her jaw, the faint lines that spoke of laughter before grief took hold. Beautiful, yes, but it was her fierce devotion to the child that struck him deepest. He'd forgotten what it looked like, that kind of love that would walk through hell barefoot. When pale light finally filtered through the frost-covered window, he woke them gently. Time to move. They made their way down the mountain as the sun climbed, revealing a world transformed. Snow had softened every harsh edge, making even Dry Creek look clean from a distance. But Colt knew better. Pretty lies were still lies, whether told in words or snow. He led them through the back alleys, avoiding Main Street where Pike's men would be watching. The Blue Lantern Saloon was just opening, its proprietor sweeping last night's sin onto the boardwalk, through the window. Colt glimpsed Red Sash Thompson holding court at the bar, no doubt spinning tales of their failed hunt. They slipped into the sheriff's office through the rear door. Ada Rios looked up from her desk, coffee cup halfway to her lips. She was a handsome woman of 40-odd years, with steel gray threading her black hair and eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. Colt Mercer, she said calmly. as if bloodied strangers appeared in her office every morning. Heard you had visitors last night. Word travels fast. Faster than you, apparently. Pike's got men at every road out of town. Her sharp gaze took in May and Wren. Mrs. Calloway, I was sorry to hear about Samuel. Thank you. May's chin lifted. Though I suspect you're the only one in town who truly means that. Ada's smile was blade thin. You'd be surprised. Your husband had friends. Quiet ones. Pike's boot's been on this town's neck too long. She set down her cup. What do you need? Colt outlined their situation quickly. The papers, the bank box, the race against time. Ada listened without interrupting, her face giving nothing away. You're asking me to open a private safety deposit box without a warrant, she said when he finished. That's theft, legally speaking. It's her property, Colt pointed out. Her husband's will names her. A will Pike claims is forged. Ada stood, strapping on her gun belt. Lucky for you. I've been investigating some irregularities at the bank. Seems several safety deposit boxes have been opened without their owner's knowledge. If I were to discover evidence of systematic fraud during my investigation. She let the implication hang. Relief flooded May's face. You'll help us? I'll uphold the law. If that happens to help you, well, Ada checked her revolver. The Lord works in mysterious ways. They were halfway to the bank when Wren tugged on Colt's sleeve. Mr. Mercer, she whispered. Those men from last night? They're following us. He glanced back casually. Two of Pike's hired guns lounged against a storefront, trying to look idle. Smart girl. How many? 4, 2 behind, 2 across the street. Her young face was serious as a judge. Papa taught me to always count the wolves. Your papa taught you well. At the bank, Ada marched in like she owned the place. The manager, a nervous man named Douglas, practically genuflected at her badge. Sheriff Rios, what brings you? Official investigation. Douglas, need access to the safety deposit boxes. Of course, but Mr. Pike said. He caught himself. Color draining from his face. Mr. Pike said what? Exactly. Ada's voice could have frozen flame. Nothing at all, right this way. The vault was cool and dim, smelling of metal and old paper. May produced a small key from a chain around her neck, another thing sewn into her clothing. Colt realized, smart woman. Box 47 opened to reveal exactly what they'd hoped deeds. Surveys, certificates of claim, all properly witnessed and notarized. And beneath those, wrapped in oilcloth, a letter in Samuel Calloway's careful hand detailing Luther Pike's threats, his offers to buy the land for a fraction of its worth, his promise that accidents happen in mining country. This is it, May breathed. This proves everything. Proves motive, Ada corrected. Not murder, but it's a start. The bank window exploded in a shower of glass. Wren screamed as gunfire erupted outside. Through the broken window, Colt saw the 2 trailing gunmen had become 6, all shooting at shadows while Pike's voice roared orders. Distraction, he said, pushing May and Wren behind a desk. They're after the papers. The vault door slammed shut. Douglas stood by the lock mechanism, sweating but determined. Mister, Pike pays better than the town, he said apologetically. Nothing personal. Ada's gun appeared in her hand. Step away from that lock, Douglas. Can't do that. Sheriff, see, there's been a terrible tragedy. Mad Dog Mercer took you hostage. Forced you down here. When we finally get this door open, could take hours, and all the confusion we'll find he killed you all and destroyed the evidence. Terrible tragedy. Pike's already got the judge ready to sign the findings. Through the walls, they could hear something worse than gunfire, the crackle of flames. Colt smelled smoke seeping under the door. They're burning the building, May said, her voice steady despite the terror in her eyes. Like I said, Douglas backed toward the door. Terrible tragedy. Ada shot him in the shoulder, spinning him into the wall. "That's for being a fool," she said conversationally. "This is for being Pike's fool." The second shot took his gun hand, but the damage was done. The lock was engaged, the building burning above them, and somewhere in Dry Creek, Luther Pike was already writing their epitaph. "There," Wren pointed to a ventilation grate near the ceiling. "Papa showed me these run to the alley." Colt boosted the girl up. Then May, her injury making her bite back cries of pain. Ada went next. Then Colt, after a moment's thought, dragged the moaning Douglas to safety too. Even fools didn't deserve burning. They emerged into chaos. Half of Main Street seemed ablaze, whether by design or accident. Pike's men had abandoned subtlety, riding through town shooting at anything that moved while the volunteer fire brigade struggled with cut hoses and sabotaged pumps. "The telegraph office," May gasped. "We have to send word to Boston." But the telegraph office was already burning, the operator fleeing with his clothes on fire. Pike had been thorough. "The hotel," Ada decided. "There's a basement entrance. We can—" A rifle bullet caught her in the side, spinning her into Colt's arms. Blood bloomed across her shirt like a terrible flower. "Go!" she gritted out, pressing her sheriff's star into May's hand. "You're deputized. Make it mean something." They ran through the smoke and flames, Colt carrying Ada while May led Wren by the hand. Behind them, Pike's voice rose above the chaos. "Find them! Find those papers!" The hotel basement was cool and dark, a blessed relief from the hell above. Colt laid Ada on a makeshift bed of flour sacks, trying to stem the bleeding. Her eyes found his, surprisingly clear. "Boston lawyers probably dead or bought," she said. "But there's another way. Records office in Cheyenne has copies of all territorial claims. Federal jurisdiction. Pike can't touch those. Cheyenne's 2 days' ride. You need a doctor. I need justice." She gripped his hand with surprising strength. "Been waiting years for someone to stand up to Pike. Don't let me die waiting." May knelt beside them, Wren's hand still in hers. "We won't. I swear it." Ada smiled, blood flecking her lips. "Good. Now get moving before—" The basement door exploded inward. Red Sash Thompson stood silhouetted against flames, grinning like a skull. "Well, well, the sheriff, the soldier, the widow, and the brat. Mister, Pike's gonna give me a bonus for this." Colt's hand found his gun, but Red Sash was faster, his rifle already aimed. In that frozen moment, Colt saw it all, May pushing Wren behind her, Ada struggling to rise, the papers that meant everything scattered on the floor. Then Wren did something unexpected. She stamped her small foot hard, and the rotten floorboard beneath Red Sash gave way. He dropped 6 inches, cursing, his shot going wild. It was enough. Colt's bullet took him center mass, sending him toppling backward into the inferno of Main Street. "Told you Papa taught me things," Wren said quietly. They escaped through the coal chute as the hotel collapsed behind them. Ada barely conscious, the precious papers clutched in May's bloody hands. The livery stable at the edge of town had been spared the flames, its owner nowhere to be seen. "Take the bay mare," Ada whispered as Colt lifted her into a wagon. "She knows the way to Cheyenne." As they rolled out of Dry Creek, the town burned behind them like a vision of judgment. May held Wren close with one arm, the other pressing cloth to Ada's wound. The papers their hope, their proof. Their future lay safe in Colt's saddlebag. But as the smoke rose into the morning sky, Colt knew this was far from over. Pike had shown his hand, revealed how far he'd go. The law might not reach him in Dry Creek, but there were other kinds of justice. The road to Cheyenne stretched ahead, long and dangerous. Behind them, Pike would be gathering his forces, pulling strings, setting traps. "You all right?" he asked May, who hadn't spoken since they'd left town. She met his eyes, and he saw something there that matched his own determination. "I will be, when this is finished." In her lap, Wren dozed fitfully, one small hand clutching the sheriff's star Ada had given them. The weight of it, of trust, of duty, of hope, seemed to fill the wagon. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The widow, the soldier, the child, and the dying sheriff. Against them stood power, money, and ruthless ambition. Colt clicked his tongue at the horses, urging them faster. In his experience, those were pretty fair odds. The abandoned sawmill stood like a skeleton against the darkening sky, its water wheel frozen solid in the creek. Colt had remembered it from his scouting days, far enough from the main roads to avoid Pike's men, close enough to water and shelter. They'd made 15 miles from Dry Creek before Ada's breathing turned ragged, forcing them to stop. "Easy now," he murmured, lifting her from the wagon. Blood had soaked through every bandage they'd improvised. May had already cleared a space inside the mill, using old grain sacks to make a pallet near the rusted machinery. "Don't fuss," Ada whispered, though her skin had gone gray as ash. "Just need to rest a spell." Wren stood guard at the door with Colt's spare pistol, too heavy for her small hands, but held steady nonetheless. The girl had aged years in the past 2 days, her childhood scrubbed away by violence and flight. "Someone's coming," she called softly. "Single rider, from the east." Colt moved to the window, rifle ready. But the figure that emerged from the twilight made him lower his weapon. "Doctor." Martha Chen rode side saddle on a spotted mare, medical bag strapped behind her. The Chinese doctor who'd been run out of Dry Creek for having the audacity to be both foreign and female, and better at her craft than the town's drunk physician. "Thought I might find you here," she said, dismounting with practiced ease. "Saw the smoke from my cabin. Figured Ada would need help, if she lived through Pike's tantrum." "How did you know?" "I know Ada Rios. She wouldn't die easy, and she wouldn't die alone." "Doctor." Chen was already kneeling beside her patient, hands gentle but efficient. "May, I need hot water. Colt, build up that fire, child. You keep watching. Your eyes are younger than ours." They worked through the night. "Doctor." Chen's hands were steady as she extracted the bullet, cleaned the wound, stitched torn flesh with silk thread fine as spider web. Ada drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling about justice and duty even in her delirium. "She'll live." "Doctor," Chen announced near dawn, washing blood from her hands. "But she can't be moved for days. Maybe weeks." "We don't have weeks," May said quietly. She sat near the fire, the precious papers spread before her as she'd studied them through the dark hours. "Pike's influence reaches everywhere. Even if we get to Cheyenne, he'll have judges, clerks, anyone who might help us." "Then we disappear," Colt suggested. "Head north to Montana territory. Start fresh." "No," May's voice carried steel. "I'm tired of running. Tired of men like Pike taking what they want because good people choose to disappear instead of fight." "Doctor," Chen smiled slightly. "Spoken like a teacher, you think education can solve everything." "Not everything, but silence solves nothing." May gathered the papers carefully. "There has to be another way. Someone Pike can't buy or threaten." "The railroad itself." Ada's voice was weak but clear. She'd woken without them noticing. "Northern Pacific has investigators, protecting their interests. Pike's been selling them false surveys, overcharging for rights of way. They'd be very interested in the truth." Colt felt a spark of hope. "Where would we find these investigators?" "Cheyenne. Suite at the Cattleman's Hotel. Man named Elijah Harper runs the operation." Ada tried to sit up. Failed. "Martha, you stubborn fool. Should have stayed away. And let you die badly, not likely. Doctor," Chen adjusted Ada's blankets with maternal efficiency. Besides, my cabin's ashes now. Pike's men were thorough. The second storm hit that afternoon, worse than the first. Wind screamed through gaps in the mill walls, driving snow horizontal. They huddled near the fire, taking turns on watch, preserving wood and food with careful economy. On the second night, Ren developed a cough that sent fear through May's heart. "Doctor." Chen brewed willow bark tea, but the child's fever climbed steadily. "She needs proper shelter," the doctor said quietly. "This cold will kill her as surely as Pike's bullets." Colt made the decision without conscious thought. "There's a trapper's cabin 4 miles up the creek. Solid walls, good chimney. I'll take her and May there. Come back for you and Ada when the storm breaks." "Splitting up is dangerous," May protested. "Staying together is death." He was already bundling supplies. "Doc's right. Ren can't take much more of this cold." They set out at dawn, Colt breaking trail through chest-deep drifts, while May carried Ren wrapped in every blanket they could spare. The child was frighteningly light, her breathing shallow against May's shoulder. The cabin appeared like a miracle, small but sturdy, with split wood already stacked under the eaves. Some other traveler's providence became their salvation. Colt got a fire roaring while May settled Ren near its warmth. "I should go back," he said. "Help Doc move Ada." May caught his sleeve. "Wait, please, just wait until I know she'll be all right." They spent the day nursing Ren through her fever. May never left the child's side, bathing her face with snowmelt, spooning broth between cracked lips. Colt found himself watching May more than the child, the tender determination in every movement, the way she hummed half-remembered hymns when Ren grew restless. "Tell me about her father," he said quietly as evening fell. May's hand stilled on Ren's forehead. "Samuel was gentle, too gentle for mining country, maybe. He believed in the law, in proper procedures. Thought if he just documented everything correctly, followed all the rules, justice would protect us." Her laugh was bitter. "Pike showed him otherwise." "You blame him, Samuel." "No, I blame myself." She met Colt's eyes across the fire. "I saw what Pike was, knew what he was capable of. I should have made Samuel leave, taken Ren somewhere safe, but I was proud, thought we could outlast him. Pride's not always a sin. Sometimes it's the only thing keeping us upright." May studied him. "Is that what kept you upright after the war?" Colt felt the old walls trying to rise, the automatic deflection, but something in her steady gaze made him speak truth. "No, pride was what nearly killed me. It was shame that kept me moving, shame and whiskey, until I found these mountains. And now," he looked at Ren, sleeping peaceful at last, then at May's face, gilded by firelight. "Now I'm thinking maybe there's better reasons to keep moving." The moment stretched between them, fragile as spun glass. Then Ren coughed, breaking the spell, and they turned their attention back to the child. By morning, her fever had broken. May wept with relief, and Colt felt his own eyes sting as Ren asked weakly for water. He'd seen too much death to take any survival for granted. "I need to fetch the others," he said. "You'll be safe here. I've set signals." Gunfire cracked across the snow. Colt shoved May down as bullets punched through the cabin walls. Outside, men's voices shouted coordinates, surrounding them with military precision. "Mercer, we know you're in there. Send out the woman and the papers, and you can walk away." "Not Red Sash this time," a cultured voice with eastern edges. Pike had hired better quality killers. "Minute I show myself, you'll shoot," Colt called back. "Perhaps, but consider the alternatives. We have the mill surrounded as well. Your sheriff friend made quite a mess before we subdued her. The Chinese woman, well, Pike has special plans for her." May's face went white. Colt felt rage rise in his throat like bile. Lies. Maybe, but maybe not. Pike's reach was long. his cruelty creative. What guarantee? None. But you're out of options. Soldier, 10 men out here. More coming. That cabin won't protect you forever. Colt's mind raced. The cabin backed against a rise, with thick timber running down to the creek. If he could buy time. Give us an hour, he called. Let me convince her. Laughter outside. 30 minutes, then we burn you out. Colt turned to May, speaking low and fast. There's a root cellar under the back corner. Leads to a natural cave. Comes out by the creek. Take Wren and run. Follow the water down to Bridger's trading post. Wire the railroad investigators from there. What about you? I'll buy you time. He was already checking weapons, counting ammunition. Give you a head start. No, May's jaw set. We stay together, or you stay together and you die together. Is that what Samuel would want? What Wren needs? His voice roughened. Let me do this one thing right. Let me save something worth saving. May looked at him for a long moment, then pulled the Bible page from her bodice. The Boston lawyer, his name is Addison Fletcher. Office on State Street. If the railroad fails, she pressed the fragment into his hand. Promise me you'll try. May. She kissed him, quick and fierce, tasting of tears and determination. Promise me. I promise. They woke Wren gently, wrapping her warmly. The root cellar was as Colt remembered, narrow but passable. May hesitated at its mouth. How will we know you're all right? He smiled, though it felt like a lie. You'll know. Then they were gone, swallowed by earth and darkness. Colt barricaded the cellar entrance and took position at the window. 30 minutes to make them believe he still had hostages. 30 minutes to make Pike's men commit to the cabin instead of searching the woods. He'd held longer positions with worse odds, but never with more reason to survive. The first rush came after 20 minutes, 3 men from the front, 2 from each side. Colt dropped one, winged another, sent them scurrying back, bought another 10 minutes with creative cursing and demands for negotiations. The second rush was coordinated. Smoke grenades through the windows, men at every wall. Colt fought like the devil himself, using furniture for cover, making every shot count. A bullet grooved his ribs, another clipped his thigh, but he kept fighting, buying distance with blood. When his ammunition ran low, he fell back to the cellar corner. Let them hear him arguing with May. Even fired shots into the empty darkness, selling the deception. They found the cellar eventually. By then, Colt figured May and Wren had an hour's lead. Maybe more, maybe enough. Clever, said the cultured voice, a thin man in city clothes. Incongruous among the hired guns. But they can't have gone far, not with a sick child. Colt smiled through blood. Further than you think. That woman's got more sand than your whole outfit combined. The thin man studied him. Pike wants you alive, says you know things. About the war, about certain activities that might interest federal prosecutors. Pike says a lot of things. Don't make them true. No, but Payne does. We'll find them. Mercer, find them and bring them back. The only question is whether you watch what happens next. Colt met his eyes steady. You do what you have to, so will I. The beating was professional, thorough. They wanted him broken but breathing. Colt had endured worse in Confederate prison camps, though not by much. He focused on one thought, May and Wren, following the creek to safety. Every blow he took was distance they gained. Finally, mercifully, darkness claimed him. His last coherent thought was a prayer to whatever God might be listening. Let them make it. Let something good come from all this blood. When he woke, he was tied across a saddle, ribs screaming with each jolting step. They were moving back toward Dry Creek, or what was left of it. Behind them, smoke rose from the burning cabin. Another shelter gone. Another refuge lost to Pike's greed. But somewhere in these mountains, a woman and child were running toward hope, toward justice, toward a future Pike couldn't steal. It wasn't victory, but for now, it was enough. The thin man rode beside him, confident in success. "They'll head for the trading post. We'll have men waiting." Colt held his silence. May was too smart for the obvious path. She'd find another way. Had to. Above them, eagles circled in a crystal sky, riding thermals toward horizons Pike would never own. Colt watched them wheel and soar, and found himself almost smiling despite the pain. The game wasn't over, not by a long shot. The ashes of the county records office were still warm when May and Wren emerged from the cave. They'd followed the creek as Colt instructed, but the smoke rising from Dry Creek's direction had drawn them back. Now they crouched in the willows, watching Pike's men sift through the ruins like carrion birds. "Look closer." "You idiots!" Luther Pike's voice carried across the morning air. He stood beside the smoldering foundation, his expensive coat dusted with ash, every scrap of paper, every burnt ledger. "I want proof those documents were destroyed." Wren tugged May's sleeve, pointing to something glinting in the rubble. A brass pin, distinctive in its craftsmanship, the sort only Josiah Whitman made for his bank locks. May felt her heart skip. If that pin had survived, it meant the fire hadn't started in the vault. It meant... "Inside job," she whispered. "They broke in first, took what they wanted, then burned the rest." "Smart girl," a voice said behind them. May spun, hand going to the pistol Colt had left her. "But Doctor," Chen raised peaceful hands, "though you might have chosen a better hiding spot, I tracked you from the creek. Martha, you're alive," they said. May caught herself. "Where's Ada?" The doctor's face darkened. "Taken. They left me for dead, but Pike's men never did learn to check properly for a pulse. Ada fought hard, too hard. They had to carry her out unconscious." She nodded toward the ruins. "I came to see what they were so eager to destroy. County records. Proof of Pike's fraud." May showed her the brass pin. "But this means they got into the vault first. Whatever they took. We'll be in Pike's safe by now." "Doctor," Chen's smile was sharp as a scalpel. "Lucky for us, I spent 6 months treating his locksmith's consumption. Poor Edgar felt guilty about the work he did, made him talkative." May felt a spark of hope. "You know the combination." "Better. I know which safe it is, hidden behind that gaudy portrait of his late wife, the one he commissioned after she died so conveniently." The doctor pulled herbs from her bag, crushing them between her fingers. "But first, we need to get you somewhere safe. That child's still weak, and you look ready to collapse." They made their way to the Chinese section of town, what remained after Pike's fires. The laundry still stood, its owner too useful to burn out completely. "Doctor." Chen led them through hanging sheets to a hidden room where several other refugees huddled. "Mrs. Henderson." May recognized the banker's wife, her usual finery replaced by borrowed clothes. "May, dear, thank God you're safe." The older woman's eyes were red from weeping. "They arrested Charles this morning, said he was embezzling. 20 years of honest service, and Pike invents charges the moment Charles questioned the fire." Others emerged from the shadows. Tom Brennan, the telegraph operator who'd refused to send false messages. Sarah Whitehorse, the Shoshone woman who'd witnessed Pike's men near Samuel's mine the day he died. Even young Billy Patterson, the stable boy who'd seen too much. Pike's overplayed his hand. "Doctor," Chen said, "heating water for tea. Too many arrests, too many fires. People are starting to notice." "Starting to notice?" May couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. "He's owned this town for years. Why notice now?" "Because you fought back." Tom Brennan spoke up, his burned hands wrapped in clean bandages. "When word spread that you'd escaped with evidence, that Sheriff Rios tried to help, it gave folks courage. Pike's had to show his true face, and it's uglier than even his friends can stomach." May felt the weight of their hope settling on her shoulders. These people were counting on her, on papers that might already be destroyed, on evidence that might never see a courtroom. "We need those telegraph records," she said finally. "If Tom's right about Pike sending false messages." "Burned," Tom said flatly. "First thing they torched, but—" He glanced around, then pulled a small notebook from his shirt. "I kept my own records. Every message Pike's men forced me to change. Every real message they suppressed. Dates, times, original text." May could have kissed him. "This is evidence of conspiracy, federal crime, interfering with telegraph communications. If we can get it to federal authorities," Mrs. Henderson added. "The territorial judge is Pike's creature. The mayor owes him money. Even the newspaper." "The newspaper?" Sarah Whitehorse interrupted. "Has a new editor as of yesterday. Young man from Philadelphia. Seems his family owns several Eastern papers and wanted him to get frontier experience. He's been asking questions about the fires." May made her decision. "Then we tell our story. All of us. Make it too big for Pike to bury." She looked at Wren, who'd been silent through all this. "Are you strong enough to be brave a little longer?" The girl nodded solemnly. "Papa would want us to finish what he started." "Doctor." Chen provided clothes that wouldn't draw attention, simple cotton and wool instead of May's torn finery. They left Wren with Mrs. Henderson, despite the child's protests, and made their way through back alleys toward the newspaper office. The Dry Creek Gazette occupied a narrow building squeezed between the barber shop and the demolished hardware store. Through the window, May could see a young man in his 20s, sleeves rolled up, wrestling with the ancient printing press. "Mr. Hartley." She knocked carefully. "My name is May Calloway. I understand you're looking for information about the fires." Jonathan Hartley looked up, ink smudged on his cheek. His eyes were intelligent behind wire-rimmed spectacles, taking in her appearance and Dr. Chen's presence with quick assessment. "Mrs. Calloway, I'd heard you'd fled town." He gestured them inside, locking the door behind them. Though obviously those reports were exaggerated. Like many of Pike's reports, May pulled out Tom's notebook. "I have a story for you, Mr. Hartley, one that involves murder, fraud, and the systematic destruction of legal records. Are you brave enough to print it?" The young man's eyes lit up. "Madam, I came west specifically to find such stories. My father thinks I'm playing at journalism. This could prove him wrong." He paused. "It could also get us killed." "Then we'd better work fast." They spent the next hours laying out the evidence, Tom's telegraph records, Mrs. Henderson's account of her husband's arrest, Sarah Whitehorse's testimony about Samuel's death. Hartley took notes in rapid shorthand, asking sharp questions, building a narrative that even Pike's judges couldn't ignore. "We'll need corroboration," he said finally. "Something beyond testimony, physical evidence." "There's a safe, Doctor," Chen said quietly. In Pike's office, behind his wife's portrait. Hartley's eyebrows rose. "You're suggesting burglary." "I'm suggesting justice." May met his gaze steady. "Pike stole those documents from the county office before burning it. We'd simply be recovering public property." The journalist smiled slowly. "When you put it that way, I suppose I did promise my father I'd be thorough in my investigations." They made their plans carefully. Doctor, Chen would create a medical emergency requiring Pike's attention food poisoning at his favorite restaurant. Perhaps May and Hartley would enter through the back while Tom Brennan watched the street. "What about Colt?" May asked suddenly. "We can't leave him." "First things first. Doctor," Chen said gently. "Without evidence, we can't help anyone." The plan went smoothly at first. Pike rushed to the restaurant when word came that several prominent citizens had fallen ill after dining there. His office stood empty, the late afternoon sun slanting through expensive curtains. May's hands shook as she lifted the portrait, Behind it, just as Dr. Chen had said, sat a Mosler safe, its brass fittings gleaming. "The combination," Hartley whispered. May closed her eyes, remembering. Edgar told Martha it was related to Pike's wife, her birthday. She tried the numbers, nothing. Their anniversary, still nothing. "The day she died," Hartley suggested grimly. The lock clicked open. Inside lay everything the original deeds. Samuel's will, surveyor reports showing the true railroad route. Even correspondence between Pike and various officials detailing bribes and threats. At the bottom, wrapped in oilcloth, was something that made May's blood run cold. Sheriff Collins's badge, still dark with dried blood. "He kept trophies," Hartley breathed. "My God, the arrogance!" They were photographing documents when footsteps echoed in the hallway. May grabbed what she could while Hartley shoved papers into his jacket. The door burst open. Not Pike Ada Rio stood there, one arm in a sling, face purple with bruises but eyes blazing with life. "Thought I'd find you here," she said calmly. "Pike's heading back. Seems someone switched his oysters for last week's batch. We've got maybe 5 minutes." They fled through gathering dusk. Documents clutched like precious ore. Behind them, Pike's roar of rage echoed off buildings when he discovered the theft. But they had what they needed, proof not just of fraud, but of murder, conspiracy, corruption reaching to the territorial capital. "The telegraph office," Hartley said. "It's been rebuilt. We can wire my father's papers, the federal marshals, everyone at once. Make it impossible to suppress." But the telegraph office was surrounded by Pike's men. Red Sash Thompson stood at the door, very much alive despite Colt's shot, his arm in a sling but his gun hand steady. "Now what?" May asked. Ada smiled, the expression terrible through her bruises. "Now we do this the old-fashioned way. Anyone here know how to start a riot?" As if in answer, a bottle sailed through the saloon window across the street. Then another. The citizens of Dry Creek, it seemed, had finally had enough. Word of the evidence had spread like wildfire, and Pike's heavy-handed response had lit the fuse. Mrs. Henderson led a group of miners' wives down Main Street, banging pots and demanding their husbands' release from Pike's private jail. Tom Brennan and the other telegraph operators marched on their former office, tools in hand. Even the Chinese laundrymen emerged, years of careful neutrality abandoned. "Beautiful chaos," Hartley murmured, already composing his headline. "Pike can't arrest the whole town." "He'll try," Ada warned. "But look there." A dust cloud on the eastern road resolved into riders, a full company of cavalry from Fort Russell, led by a face May recognized from newspaper sketches, Major James Brighton, the territorial governor's special investigator. Someone got word out after all. "Doctor," Chen said with satisfaction. "I treated the major's daughter last winter. Sent a message with a patient I discharged this morning. The federal presence changed everything." Pike's men melted away like snow in spring. Suddenly, remembering urgent business elsewhere, Pike himself emerged from his office, trying to bluster, to claim authority. Major Brighton wasn't impressed. "Luther Pike, you're under arrest for conspiracy to defraud the United States government, interference with federal communications, and suspected murder. You'll answer to federal prosecutors in Cheyenne. This is preposterous, I demand." "You can demand all you like from your cell." Brighton nodded to his men. "Take him." But May barely heard Pike's protests. Her eyes had found another figure in the cavalry column, Colt, battered but upright, riding beside a younger officer. He swung down from his horse, moving stiffly, and May found herself running. She stopped just short of throwing herself at him, suddenly aware of the watching crowd. "You're alive," she said stupidly. "Mostly." His smile was crooked through split lips. "Major Brighton found me on the road. Seems Dr. Chen's message mentioned I might need assistance. I have the documents, all of them. Pike kept everything." "I know." He touched her face gently. Brighton told me. You did it, May. You won. She shook her head. We won, all of us. The crowd was growing, citizens emerging from hiding to witness Pike's arrest. Someone started clapping Mrs. Henderson, tears streaming down her face. Others joined in, the sound building like thunder. Justice, someone shouted. Real justice. But May's eyes were on Wren, who'd broken free from her caretakers to run toward them. Colt caught the girl, lifting her despite his injuries, and for a moment they stood there, the three of them together, while a town celebrated its freedom. What happens now? Wren asked, looking between the adults. May met Colt's eyes over the child's head, saw her own hopes reflected there. Now we rebuild, better than before. Together, the question was Colt's, quiet enough that only she could hear. Together, she confirmed. Around them, Dry Creek began the long work of reclaiming itself. The federal troops would ensure order, the evidence would see proper courts, and Pike would answer for his crimes. But for May, the victory was simpler and sweeter, the weight of a child in Colt's arms, the promise of tomorrows they'd build with their own hands. The sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Somewhere in the crowd, Jonathan Hartley was already setting type, his story of corruption defeated by courage ready for the morning edition. But May had found her own story's ending, written in the ashes of all they'd lost and the hope of all they'd found. It wasn't the ending she'd planned when she'd married Samuel, when she'd come west with dreams of teaching and building. It was better, forged in fire, tested by storm, and strong enough to last. The brass pin from the bank vault still rested in her pocket, evidence of crimes committed and justice served. She pulled it out, studied it in the fading light, then handed it to Ada. For the new sheriff's evidence locker, she said, when you're well enough to build one. Ada's battered face split in a grin. Already making plans. Teacher, this town's going to need proper law, proper schools, proper everything. Then we'd better get started, May said, and meant it. The iron rails stretched east toward Cheyenne, glinting like twin serpents in the morning sun. May adjusted Wren's coat against the wind while Colt studied the horizon with a scout's practiced eye. 3 days since Pike's arrest, and already his remaining men were regrouping under new leadership. Stage road safer, Ada said from her mount, still moving carefully but insisting on accompanying them. Railroad draws trouble like honey draws flies. Stage roads watched. Colt countered. They'll expect us to take the easy route to Cheyenne. The rails follow Powder River Gorge harder traveling, but better cover. May touched the leather portfolio containing their evidence duplicates of everything, with originals already secured by Major Brighton's men. How many men does Pike still have? 20, maybe 30 who stayed loyal. Ada shifted in her saddle, wincing. His foreman, Jake Tanner, took over. Not as smart as Pike, but twice as mean. They'd assembled a small party, Colt leading. Ada riding despite Dr. Chen's protests, Tom Brennan driving a supply wagon, and 2 of Brighton's soldiers as escort. The major himself had remained in Dry Creek to maintain order, but promised federal prosecutors would meet them in Cheyenne to take their testimony. We push hard. We can make Bitter Creek by nightfall. Colt decided, there's a way station there, fortified. We rest the horses, then tackle the gorge at first light. They set out as the town disappeared behind them, following the railroad grade through increasingly rough country. Wren rode with May, eyes bright with the adventure despite everything she'd endured. The child had developed a fierce attachment to Colt, watching him with the hero worship of the young. By noon, they'd reached the Badlands where red rock erupted from the earth like broken teeth. The wind sang mournful through the formations, carrying the scent of sage and distant snow. Colt called a halt near a spring, letting the horses drink while he scouted ahead. Riders, he said quietly on return. 6 of them, paralleling our route, staying just out of rifle range. Tanner's men, Ada asked. most likely testing our resolve. He checked his Winchester. They'll wait until we're in the gorge. Confined space, limited options. May felt fear curl in her stomach, but kept her voice steady. Then we don't go through the gorge. Have to. Only way to Cheyenne that doesn't add 50 miles. Colt's eyes found hers. But there are ways to even the odds. They pushed on. The watching riders maintaining their distance like wolves trailing wounded elk. The entrance to Powder River Gorge loomed ahead, sheer walls rising 200 feet, the river running fast and cold between them. The railroad tracks clung to one wall on a narrow grade blasted from solid rock. There, Tom pointed to a wooden trestle spanning a deep cut. If they mean to stop us, that's where... Colt nodded grimly. Which is why we're not crossing it. There's an old military road, follows the river bottom. Rough going, but passable. They descended carefully, horses picking their way down the steep trail. The gorge walls closed around them, cutting off the sky to a ribbon of blue. Every sound echoed off stone hoofbeats, water rushing, the cry of a hawk high above. May kept Wren close, trying not to think about ambush, about bullets ricocheting off rock. The child seemed to sense her fear, sitting straighter, trying to be brave. They'd made 2 miles when the first shot rang out. The bullet sparked off stone near Colt's head, sending chips flying. He wheeled his horse, already firing back as more shots erupted from the rim rock above. Their attackers had the high ground, perfect position. "The overhang," Ada shouted, pointing to a deep cut in the cliff face. "Move!" They spurred toward shelter, Tom whipping the wagon team frantically. Bullets whined overhead, kicked up sand at their feet. One of the soldiers cried out, clutching his shoulder, but stayed mounted. The overhang provided cover but also trapped them. Their attackers could wait, take shots at leisure, or simply starve them out. "How many?" May asked, trying to shield Wren with her body. 8, maybe 10. Colt was already calculating angles, distances. "But they've got to come down to finish this. That trail's their only approach." "Unless they brought dynamite," Ada said darkly. "Bring the whole cliff down on us." As if her words summoned it. They heard the distinctive hiss of a lit fuse. Colt grabbed May and Wren, diving deeper under the overhang as the explosion shook the gorge. Rock rained down, dust clouding everything. When it cleared, their shelter remained intact, but the trail behind them was blocked by tons of fallen stone. No retreat now. "They're coming," Tom said, pointing to figures descending the cliff trail. Colt positioned them carefully, Ada and the wounded soldier covering the approaches. Tom ready with ammunition. He pressed a rifle into May's hands. "You remember what I taught you?" She nodded, though her hands trembled. "Squeeze, don't pull, breathe out slow." "That's my girl." The endorsement slipped out naturally, and May felt warmth despite the danger. The attack came in waves. Jake Tanner's men were good, but the confined space worked against them too. They had to advance along predictable routes, and Colt made them pay for every foot. May fired when she had clear shots, trying not to think about the fact she was shooting at human beings. Beside her, Wren reloaded spent rifles with quick efficiency, her small hands steady. "They're trying to flank us," Ada warned, then gasped as a bullet creased her injured side. Colt moved like the soldier he'd been, seeming to be everywhere at once. May watched him fight with desperate skill, buying them time with precise violence. But their ammunition was running low, and Tanner's men kept coming. Then, through the gunfire, came a sound that made everyone pause, a train whistle, echoing off the gorge walls. The westbound freight. Tom breathed. "It's early." The locomotive appeared around the bend, black smoke billowing, wheels shrieking as the engineer saw the fight and hit the brakes. But momentum carried it forward, right into the middle of the battle. "The train!" Colt shouted. "Get to the train!" They broke from cover, running alongside the slowly moving freight cars. Colt boosted Wren up to Tom, who'd already made the leap. May felt hands lifting her Ada, spending her last strength. She tumbled into a boxcar, turning to help pull Ada after her. Gunfire erupted behind them. Colt was still on the ground, keeping Tanner's men pinned while the others escaped. May saw him take a hit, spinning but not falling, still firing as he ran. "Jump!" she screamed. He leaped for the boxcar door just as the train picked up speed. His hands caught the edge, but his strength was failing, blood spreading across his shirt. May grabbed his wrists, hauling with everything she had. Tom joined her, then Ada, and together they dragged him inside as bullets splintered the door frame. The train gained speed, leaving Tanner's cursing men behind. Colt lay gasping on the boxcar floor, hand pressed to his ribs where blood seeped between his fingers. "Let me see," May demanded, tearing fabric for bandages. "Just a graze," he managed. "Had worse." "Stop being heroic and let me help." She worked quickly, efficiently, the way Dr. Chen had taught her. The wound was deeper than a graze, but had missed anything vital. "You're lucky." "No," he said, catching her hand. "I'm blessed. Found something worth bleeding for again." The train carried them through the gorge and into open country. Cheyenne bound, the wounded soldier needed proper medical attention, but he'd live. Ada dozed fitfully, exhausted by the fight. Tom kept watch at the door while Wren curled against May's side. "We lost the wagon," May said quietly. "Some of the evidence." "We've got enough." Colt's voice was rough with pain, but certain. "And we've got witnesses now. Tanner's attack proves Pike's guilt. No innocent man sends killers after prosecution witnesses." The sun was setting when they reached the outskirts of Cheyenne, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. The conductor, once he'd heard their story, had wired ahead. Federal marshals waited at the station, along with an ambulance for the wounded. But May's attention was caught by another figure, a dignified man in a dark suit, standing apart from the official crowd. Something about him seemed familiar. Missa Calloway. He approached as they disembarked, removing his hat. "My name is Elijah Harper. I believe you have information regarding certain railroad surveys." The Northern Pacific investigator Ada had mentioned. May felt relief wash over her. "Mr. Harper, yes, we have evidence of fraud, false surveys, and murder." His eyes sharpened. "Murder. My husband discovered the true railroad route. Luther Pike killed him for it." Harper studied her face. Then Colt's bloodied form, Ada's bandages, Wren's solemn eyes. "It seems you've all paid a high price for this information. The railroad owes you a debt." "We don't want money," May said firmly. "We want justice and protection for the people of Dry Creek who stood with us." "You'll have both." Harper's smile was cold as winter steel. "Pike cost my employers millions with his schemes. We take that personally. Every resource we have is at your disposal." They were escorted to the Cattleman's Hotel, where doctors waited to tend wounds and federal prosecutors prepared to take statements. May insisted on staying with Colt while they cleaned and stitched his injury, holding his hand through the worst of it. "You saved us," she said softly when they were alone. "Again." "We saved each other." He touched her face with his good hand. "That's what partners do." Partners. The word hung between them, loaded with possibility. May thought of all the miles they'd traveled, all the dangers faced. Somewhere along the way, this scarred ex-soldier had become essential to her world. "Colt," she began, but he pressed a finger to her lips. "Rest first. Talk later. We've got time now." But even as May settled Wren in their hotel room, watching the child fall into exhausted sleep, she knew their fight wasn't over. Pike still had money, lawyers, influence. The trial would be long and bitter. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Ada entered, moving stiffly but with purpose. "Harper's investigators found something," she said quietly. The bank clerk Pike had in his pocket, Edgar Morrison. He wants to testify, has records going back years. Every forged document, every bribe, Pike's whole organization is unraveling. May felt a surge of hope. Then we might actually win this. We've already won the hardest part. Ada smiled. We survived. We stood up. That matters more than any verdict. Through the window, Cheyenne's lights twinkled like earthbound stars. Somewhere in this city, prosecutors were building their case, marshals were gathering evidence, and justice was slowly grinding forward. May thought of Samuel, of his gentle faith in law and order. He'd been right. In the end, the system could work. When good people forced it to. I'm going to testify, Wren announced from the bed, apparently not as asleep as she'd seemed. Tell them about Papa. Make sure they know he was brave. May sat beside her, smoothing her hair. He was brave, and so are you. Will Mr. Colt stay with us after the trial? May glanced at Ada, who smiled knowingly and excused herself. The question Wren asked was the same one May's heart had been whispering for days. I don't know, sweetheart. That's up to him. I hope he does. Wren yawned. We're a good family. Family? The words settled around May's shoulders like a warm shawl. Yes, she thought. Despite everything, or perhaps because of it, they'd become exactly that. Outside, a train whistle called through the night, bound for distant horizons. But May no longer felt the urge to run. She'd found her stand, her place, her people. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and questions, testimony and truth-telling. But tonight, she had this sleeping child, trusted friends, and somewhere nearby. A good man healing from wounds taken in their defense. It was more than enough. It was everything. The old warehouse stood at the edge of Cheyenne's rail yards, its weathered boards silver in the moonlight. They'd moved here after Pike's lawyers had made the hotel too public, too exposed. Federal marshals guarded the perimeter, but inside, the space felt intimate hay bales stacked against walls, a pot-bellied stove glowing warm, blankets spread like a makeshift home. Tomorrow, the trial would begin. Tomorrow, May would face Pike across a courtroom and speak her truth. But tonight, you should rest, Colt said quietly. He sat by the window, keeping watch despite the marshals outside. His wound had healed enough for movement, though May could see him favoring his ribs. Can't sleep. She moved to stand beside him, looking out at the star-scattered sky. Keep thinking about everything that's led us here. Samuel, the fire, that first night in your cabin. Seems like a lifetime ago. It was, we're different people now. She turned to study his profile in the dim light. The hard edges remained, but something had softened around his eyes. His mouth. Colt, what happens after when the trial's done? He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, depends. On what? On what you want. What you and Wren need. He faced her fully then. I've got nothing to offer but a pair of willing hands and a past full of ghosts. You deserve better than... She stopped his words with her fingers against his lips. Don't decide what I deserve. I'm tired of men making choices for me, even with good intentions. His eyes searched hers. Then what do you choose? May. The question hung between them like morning mist. Around them, the warehouse creaked and settled. From the far corner where Wren slept, they could hear the child's peaceful breathing. This strange sanctuary had become their whole world, and tomorrow threatened to shatter it. I choose courage, May said finally. I choose to stop being afraid. She saw the moment he understood. His hands came up to frame her face, calloused thumbs infinitely gentle against her skin. May, I know what I've survived, what we've both survived. I won't let fear steal any more from me. Her voice trembled but held steady. I feel safe with you. Colt, For the first time since Samuel died, I feel—" He kissed her then, soft as a question. She answered by pressing closer, her hands finding his shoulders, careful of his healing wound. The kiss deepened, became something more than comfort, more than gratitude. It was promise and plea combined. When they broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, May felt exposed as winter wheat. The old fears whispered at her mind's edges memories of rough hands, cruel words, the weight of unwanted attention. But Colt's eyes held only patience, only care. "Go slow," she whispered, echoing words she'd thought but never spoken. I need to go slow." "We've got all the time in the world," he murmured, drawing her against him, her back to his chest so she didn't feel trapped. His arms encircled her loosely, a shelter she could leave at will. "This is enough. You're enough." But it wasn't enough. Not for her, not anymore. She turned in his arms, hands sliding up to cup his face. "I'm tired of being broken, tired of letting Pike and men like him steal all the gentle things." Her voice caught. "Help me remember what it's like, to be touched with kindness, to choose instead of endure." "May." Her name was almost a prayer on his lips. "Are you certain?" She nodded, not trusting word. He studied her face in the lamplight, reading truth there, then slowly lowered his head to kiss her again. This time she felt the careful restraint in him, the way he held back, letting her set the pace. They moved to the blankets by the stove, each motion deliberate and consensual. When her hands shook on his shirt buttons, he covered them with his own, stilling them. "We can stop, any time, for any reason." "I know," and that knowing, that certainty of choice, gave her strength. "I don't want to stop. I want to feel alive again." He helped her with the buttons then, his own hands not quite steady, in the stove's warm light. Scars mapped stories across his chest and arms, the war's brutal calligraphy. She traced them gently, learning this new geography of survival. "You're beautiful," he said, and she almost believed him. Not the surface beauty that had drawn unwanted attention, but something deeper, the beauty of endurance, of choosing to remain soft in a hard world. When old panic tried to rise, he sensed it immediately, drawing back to give her space. "Tell me what you need. Just hold me. Let me feel safe first." He gathered her close, her head on his shoulder, his heartbeat steady under her palm. They lay like that, fully clothed except for his shirt, while her breathing slowly calmed. His hands moved over her back in soothing strokes, patient as seasons. "I'm not fragile," she said eventually. "Not anymore. I've walked through fire, fought for what's mine. I won't break from tenderness." "I know." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "Strongest woman I've ever known. But strength doesn't mean you have to bear everything alone." She lifted her head to look at him. "Then help me. Help me take back what was stolen, not my innocence that's gone, but my right to choose joy, to feel without fear." What followed was careful as a prayer, gentle as spring rain. He asked permission with every touch, every kiss, building a new foundation of trust over old ruins. When clothing whispered away, it was her choice, her hands guiding. When he paused, concerned by her trembling, she drew him closer. "I'm not afraid," she whispered. "Not of you, never of you." "Darling," he breathed against her throat, the endearment slipping free. "I'll mend you with love, every broken place, every hurt, if you'll let me." "We'll mend each other." The words became truth between them, sealed with touch and tenderness. What might have been desperate became deliberate. What might have been taking became giving, mutual and consensual and healing as summer rain. When the old fears tried to intrude phantom hands, cruel voices, she opened her eyes to find Colt watching her with such reverence it took her breath. This was nothing like before. This was choosing and being chosen. This was sacred. "Stay with me," she whispered, Stay present. Always, he promised, and she believed him. Time stretched like taffy, sweet and golden. The stove's warmth wrapped around them like a blessing. Somewhere in the darkness, a train whistle called, but it seemed part of another world. Here, now, there was only this two wounded souls choosing to trust, to heal, to hope. Later, wrapped in blankets and each other, May felt tears slide down her cheeks. Colt tensed, concerned, but she smiled through the salt. Happy tears, she assured him. I'd forgotten those existed. He kissed them away, reverent as a believer at an altar. Thank you. For what? For trusting me with this, with you. His voice roughed. I'd forgotten too, what it meant to be gentle, to be worthy of gentleness. They held each other as the night deepened, speaking in whispers about everything and nothing, about the trial tomorrow, about the future they might build if courage held, about Wren, and whether she'd accept Colt as more than a protector. She already has, May said. Yesterday she asked if she could call you Papa Colt. His breath caught. What did you tell her? To ask you herself. She traced patterns on his chest, feeling his heartbeat quicken. Would that be all right? It's not too much too soon. May. He tilted her chin up to meet his eyes. There's nothing about you and that child that could be too much. You're everything I never dared hope for. Fresh tears threatened. To cover them, she tried for lightness. Even with a trial tomorrow, Pike's lawyers will try to tear me apart. They'll try. His arms tightened around her. But you've already survived worse. And you won't be alone. Not ever again, if I have say in it. The promise settled around her like armor. Tomorrow would come with its challenges, its attempts to break her resolve. But tonight had given her something unbreakable, the knowledge that she could choose joy after sorrow, trust after betrayal, love after loss. I should check on Wren, she said eventually, though reluctance colored her voice. She's safe. Marshall's outside. Us in here. Rest a bit longer. So she did, drowsing in the circle of his arms while he kept watch. The nightmares that had plagued her for months stayed away, held at bay by the steady rhythm of his breathing, the solid warmth of his presence. Near dawn, she woke to find him still awake, still watchful. The coming day sat heavy between them, the trial, the testimony, the need to face Pike and speak truth to power. Whatever happens, she said, this was worth it. You were worth it. He kissed her forehead, soft as a blessing. You saved me, May Calloway. Long before tonight, that first day, when you trusted me to help, you gave me purpose again, reason to fight for something beyond my own ghosts. We saved each other, she corrected, echoing his own words from days past. Outside, the sky began to lighten, painting the warehouse walls in shades of pearl. Soon, the marshals would come to escort them to court. Soon, she'd have to don her armor of propriety and face the men who'd tried to destroy her. But she would face them as a different woman than the one who'd fled into a blizzard weeks ago. That woman had been running from... This woman was running toward justice, toward a future, toward the family she'd chosen and who'd chosen her. Ready? Colt asked as footsteps approached outside. May rose, straightening her clothes, pinning up her hair in the growing light. She looked like what she was, a survivor preparing for battle. But underneath the steel was something new, something that glowed warm as banked coals and twice as enduring. Ready? She said, and meant it. He stood with her, and despite everything proper and practical, pulled her close for one more kiss. It was promise and prayer combined, strength given and received. When the marshals knocked, they were standing side by side, hands clasped, facing the door together. Whatever came next, they'd meet it as partners, as family, as two people who'd found their way through darkness to a love neither had dared hope for. The warehouse door opened to admit the morning. Time to face the world. But first, May squeezed Colt's hand, drawing strength from his answering pressure. They'd already won the only victory that truly mattered. Everything else was just details. The Cheyenne courthouse stood like a fortress against the morning sky, its limestone walls already gathering heat despite the early hour. May adjusted her black dress, borrowed from a sympathetic merchant's wife, and tried to calm her racing heart. Beside her, Colt looked uncomfortable in his own borrowed suit, but his presence steadied her more than any words could. "Remember," Federal Prosecutor Harrison Walsh said, reviewing his notes one final time. "Pike's lawyers will try to discredit you, attack your character, your relationship with your husband, anything to make the jury doubt. Don't let them rattle you." "They can try," May said quietly. Through the courthouse windows, she could see crowds gathering. News of the trial had spread: the widow versus the mining baron. Corruption exposed. Justice on the scales. Wren tugged at May's sleeve. "There are so many people." "Good," Ada said from her wheelchair, still too weak to stand but insisting on attending. "Let them see what Pike really is. Let them all see." They entered through a side door to avoid the crowds. The courtroom was already packed. Journalists from as far as Denver and San Francisco filling the press section. May spotted Jonathan Hartley from the Dry Creek Gazette, his pen poised eagerly. And there, at the defendant's table, sat Luther Pike. He looked smaller than May remembered, though no less dangerous. His expensive lawyers flanked him like guard dogs, 3 men from Chicago known for getting guilty men free. Pike's eyes found hers across the room, and his smile was cold as winter stone. All rise for Judge Theodore Brennan presiding. Judge Brennan was new to the territory, appointed specifically for this case to avoid local corruption. His face was stern, but fair as he called the court to order. Walsh opened with devastating efficiency, laying out the evidence: forged documents, stolen claims, intimidation, murder. Edgar Morrison, Pike's former bank clerk, testified first, his hands shaking as he detailed years of fraud. Tom Brennan followed with his telegraph records. Doctor. Chen spoke of treating men Pike had ordered beaten. Then came May's turn. "State your name for the record." "May Elizabeth Calloway." "Mrs. Calloway, please tell the court about your husband's death." May spoke clearly, letting truth be her shield. Samuel's discovery of the railroad surveys, Pike's offers to buy their land, the threats that followed refusal, the day Samuel left for the mine and never returned. "Objection," Pike's lead attorney, Silas Corbett, rose smoothly. "Speculation and hearsay, Mrs. Calloway has no direct evidence linking my client to her husband's unfortunate accident." "I have his letters," May said, producing Samuel's final correspondence. "Warning me about Pike, telling me where he'd hidden the real surveys." The letters were admitted into evidence. Walsh guided her through the night of the blizzard, Colt's rescue, the flight to Dry Creek. She spoke of the burned buildings, the attacks, Ada's shooting. Her voice remained steady even when describing Pike's men hunting them through the gorge. Then came cross-examination. Corbett approached like a snake in a good suit. "Mrs. Calloway, you've painted quite a dramatic picture. Tell me, what was your relationship with Colt Mercer before your husband's death?" "There was no relationship." "We'd never met." "Never yet within days of becoming a widow. You were living in his cabin, alone, unchaperoned." May felt heat rise in her cheeks, but kept her voice level. "Mr. Mercer saved our lives. We were fleeing men who meant to kill us." "So you say, but isn't it possible you and Mr. Mercer conspired together, that perhaps your husband's death was convenient for both of you?" "Objection!" Walsh shot to his feet. "Counsel is making wild accusations without foundation." "I'm merely exploring possibilities." Corbett smiled. "Mrs. Calloway, you're asking this court to believe that my client, a respected businessman, orchestrated elaborate crimes. Yet the only witnesses to these alleged crimes are yourself, a known killer. He gestured to Colt. And a collection of society's cast-offs. Isn't it more likely that you've invented this conspiracy to cover your own guilt? May's hands clenched in her lap. But then she felt Wren's small hand slip into hers. The child had moved from the gallery, and no one had stopped her. That small gesture of support gave May strength. No, Mr. Corbett, what's likely is that Luther Pike has gotten away with murder and theft for so long. He thought he could silence anyone, but he was wrong. Your Honor, Corbett protested. The child should be removed. The child, Judge Brennan said mildly, is sitting quietly with her guardian. Continue, counselor, but find a different line of questioning. Corbett tried several more approaches, each more desperate, but May held firm, anchored by Wren's presence and Colt's steady gaze from the gallery. When Corbett finally dismissed her, she felt wrung dry but victorious. The trial continued through the afternoon. Ada testified from her wheelchair, her badge gleaming on her chest as she detailed Pike's corruption of the law. Elijah Harper presented the railroad's evidence of survey fraud, even misses. Henderson took the stand, describing her husband's false arrest. Then the defense began its case, and May understood why Pike looked confident despite the evidence. Jake Tanner testified that Colt had attacked them unprovoked, that May had seduced the ex-soldier into helping steal from Pike. Other bought witnesses painted Pike as a benefactor, May as a scheming woman using her feminine wiles. She bewitched him. One saloon girl testified, clearly reading from a script. Saw her making eyes at Mercer before her husband was cold. The lies piled up like cordwood. May felt each one like a physical blow. Beside her, Colt's jaw was granite, his hands fisted on his knees. Then Pike himself took the stand. He was magnificent in his deception. May had to admit, sorrowful about Samuel's accident, shocked by the conspiracy against him, painting himself as a victim of jealous competitors and a vengeful widow. I tried to help her, Pike said, manufacturing tears. Offered to buy the land at a fair price, to save her from the burden, but she'd already taken up with Mercer. They concocted this scheme to destroy me, to steal what I'd built through honest work. The crowd murmured. Some clearly believed him. May felt the case slipping away despite all their evidence. Pike had spent years building his reputation, buying loyalty. Would truth be enough against such practiced lies? Thunder rumbled outside, matching the storm in May's heart, as if heaven itself was angry. Rain began lashing the windows. The room darkened, lamps flickering in the wind that found every gap. Your Honor. Walsh stood as Pike left the stand. The prosecution requests to recall one witness, someone just arrived from Dry Creek with urgent testimony. Judge Brennan frowned. It's highly irregular. Please, Your Honor, this witness has direct evidence of the defendant's crimes. Very well, but this better be worth the court's time. The doors opened. A woman entered, moving slowly, supported by a cane. May gasped Sarah Whitehorse, the Shoshone woman who disappeared after the fires. But she looked different, older, weighted by whatever she'd endured. State your name. Sarah Whitehorse Calloway. She looked directly at May. I was Samuel's first wife. The courtroom erupted. May felt the world tilt. First wife, but Samuel had said. Judge Brennan hammered for order. Explain yourself, madam. Sarah's voice was steady, carrying the music of her people. Samuel and I married young, in the Shoshone way. When he went east for schooling, his family was ashamed. They paid me to disappear, to let him marry properly. I agreed, for his sake. But I stayed near, watched. When he came back with May, I saw he was happy. I would have remained silent forever. But, her eyes found Pike. This man killed my husband. I saw it happen. Objection. Corbett was on his feet. This woman appears from nowhere with no proof of identity. I have proof. Sarah produced a leather pouch. Inside were documents, a marriage certificate in Shoshone and English, letters from Samuel, photographs. And I have this. She held up a distinctive pocket watch, its case engraved with Samuel's initials. May recognized it immediately. Samuel's most prized possession, supposedly lost in the cave-in. I was gathering herbs near the mine that day. Sarah continued. I saw Pike and his men force Samuel into the shaft. Heard Pike say, make it look natural. I saw them bring out his body. Pike took this watch as a trophy. Later, drunk, he gave it to one of his men. I traded everything I had to get it. Lies. Pike surged to his feet. Your Honor, this is obvious fabrication. Then how? Sarah asked quietly. Do I know about the scar on your left shoulder? The one you got when Samuel fought back? The one you've hidden all these weeks? Pike's hand moved involuntarily toward his shoulder. That tiny gesture spoke louder than any confession. What followed was chaos. Pike's lawyers demanded recess, mistrial, anything. But Judge Brennan had seen enough. When order was restored, Sarah finished her testimony with quiet dignity, telling of years spent watching Pike destroy lives, waiting for the moment justice might listen. Why come forward now? Walsh asked gently. Sarah's eyes found May again. Because she fought when I couldn't. Because she protected Samuel's child when I had none to protect. Because sometimes the truth needs many voices before it's heard. When the jury retired to deliberate, May found herself face to face with Sarah in the hallway. The two women studied each other past and present. Two kinds of love for the same good man. I'm sorry, Sarah said simply, for the deception, for the pain this must cause. May felt Colt's supportive presence behind her, Wren's hand in hers. You loved him. You sought justice for him. There's no shame in that. Sarah's weathered face softened. He chose well. The second time. You and the child, you're what he would have wanted. The jury returned in less than an hour. Guilty on all charges. Pike's roar of rage was cut short by federal marshals placing him in irons. 25 years at hard labor. The judge pronounced forfeiture of all illegally gained assets. But May barely heard the sentence. She was watching Sarah slip quietly from the courtroom. Her duty done, disappearing back into the margins of history. A quiet heroine whose courage had tipped the scales. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving Cheyenne's streets washed clean. The crowd that gathered was different now, cheering instead of gawking. Someone started clapping for the widow who'd brought down a giant. It's over, Wren breathed, wonder in her voice. No, Colt corrected gently, his arm around May's shoulders. Now it begins, the real work, building something better where Pike's shadow used to fall. They stood on the courthouse steps, surrounded by well-wishers and journalists. Jonathan Hartley was already composing his headline. Ada was directing federal marshals from her wheelchair. And somewhere, Luther Pike was learning that justice, though slow, had a long reach. May felt the weight of the past months settle into her bones, exhaustion and relief in equal measure. But stronger than both was hope, for Dry Creek's future, for Wren's inheritance restored, for the life she and Colt might build together. So, Mrs. Calloway. Hartley pushed through the crowd. A statement for the press. May looked at the eager faces, all waiting for her words. Once, such attention would have terrified her. Now she stood straight, voice clear. Justice was served today, not just for my husband, but for all those Luther Pike crushed beneath his greed. Let this be a lesson no man is above the law when good people stand together. Thunder rumbled again, but distant now. Moving away across the prairie, the storm had passed. Time to rebuild. Home, Colt asked quietly. May smiled, knowing home was no longer a place but the people beside her. Home. They walked down the courthouse steps, together the widow, the soldier, and the child. Behind them, Luther Pike's empire crumbled. Ahead lay all the possibilities of the frontier, wide and bright as prairie sky. Justice had been served. Now came the harder task, building something worthy in its wake. But May had learned something in these weeks of trial by fire and ice. The strongest structures weren't built alone. They were built by communities, by families both born and chosen, by love that endured despite every storm. She squeezed Colt's hand, felt him squeeze back. Wren skipped ahead, finally free to be a child again. They'd won more than a court case today. They'd won the right to their future, earned in courage and paid for in truth. It was enough. It was everything. It was just the beginning. Spring came early to Dry Creek that year, melting the last stubborn patches of snow and coaxing green from the prairie grass. May stood on the porch of the new schoolhouse, watching her students scatter toward home, their laughter bright as the wildflowers beginning to dot the hills. "Miss May," Wren called from the doorway. "Billy Patterson put a frog in Anna's lunch pail again." "Did he now?" May tried to look stern, but felt her lips twitch. Some things about children never changed, whether in Boston drawing rooms or frontier school rooms. "Billy Patterson, you'll be washing blackboards for a week." The boy groaned, but grinned, unrepentant. As the last student departed, May surveyed her domain with satisfaction. The schoolhouse was modest one room, pine boards still sweet with sap, windows that actually opened, but it was hers, built with lumber from the new mill and labor from grateful townspeople. "Admiring your handiwork." She turned to find Colt approaching, his ranger badge glinting in the afternoon sun. He'd accepted a position as territorial forest ranger, not full-time, as Major Brighton had wanted, but enough to provide steady income while leaving time for what mattered. "Our handiwork," she corrected, moving into his arms with the ease of 6 months' practice. "You laid most of those floorboards under your exacting supervision." He kissed her temple, then frowned. "You're tired. The school board meeting ran late again." "Only till midnight." She leaned into his strength. "They finally approved funds for books, real textbooks, not just whatever we could scavenge." "That's wonderful." He studied her face. "But," May sighed, "Luther Pike still has friends. They're pushing to restrict who can attend. No Chinese children, no Indian children, no undesirable elements." "Over my dead body," Ada Rios said from the street. "The sheriff officially elected now. The temporary designation long gone dismounted with her usual economy of motion. That's not the town we fought for." "No," May agreed. "It's not." They walked together toward the center of town, past businesses rebuilt stronger than before. The Blue Lantern still served whiskey, but now it also hosted town meetings. The bank had new management. Edgar Morrison, given a second chance, had proven scrupulously honest. Even a small clinic had opened, with Dr. Chen presiding over modern equipment purchased with funds recovered from Pike's accounts. "Letter came for you," Ada said, producing an envelope from her vest. "Boston postmark." May recognized the handwriting immediately. Addison Fletcher, Samuel's lawyer, had been found living after all Pike's men had only driven him into hiding. His letters came regularly now. Updates on the legal trust established for Wren, ensuring her inheritance remained protected until she came of age. This letter was different, shorter, more urgent. "What is it?" Colt asked, reading her expression. "Fletcher's found something. In Samuel's papers from before we met. A certificate of deposit in a San Francisco bank. Samuel apparently invested early profits from the mine." She looked up, stunned. "It's worth considerably more now." "How much more?" "Enough to build 10 schools, or—" May's mind raced. "Enough to ensure this school stays open to everyone, regardless of what the board says." Ada smiled her sharp smile. "Money talks louder than prejudice, usually." They were discussing possibilities when hoofbeats thundered down Main Street. A familiar figure rode hard toward them, Tom Brennan, sweat darkening his horse's flanks. "Sheriff Mrs. Mercer," he reined up sharp. "Trouble at the White Horse Ranch. Sarah's nephew says men are trying to force them off their land." Claims of invalid deed, same as Pike used to pull. May's blood chilled. They'd thought Pike's influence died with his imprisonment, but evil had deep roots. How many men? 8, maybe 10, led by that snake Silas Corbett. Pike's former lawyer, still slithering around the edges of respectability. May and Colt exchanged looks. "I'll gather deputies," Ada said, but May was already moving. "I'm coming too. Sarah testified for us. We won't abandon her now." May Colt began. "Don't," she faced him squarely. "I'm not the frightened woman you pulled from a snowstorm. I've learned to shoot. I've faced worse than Corbett." Sarah stood up when it mattered. "So will I." Pride and worry warred in his expression before pride won. "Then we'd better hurry." They rode out as the sun peaked Ada, Colt, May, Tom, and 3 deputized townsmen. The White Horse Ranch lay 15 miles north. Good bottomland that Sarah's family had worked for 2 generations. Perfect target for new schemes. They heard the shouting before they saw the house. Corbett's voice, oily with false authority. "Final notice, vacate immediately or face forcible removal." The scene was grimly familiar. Armed men surrounded the small ranch house while Corbett waved official-looking papers. Sarah stood on her porch, rifle in hand, while her nephew and his family huddled behind her. "That's far enough, Corbett," Ada called out, her sheriff's star catching light. "Whatever snake oil you're selling, nobody's buying." Corbett turned, his smile faltering at their numbers. "Sheriff Rios, this is a civil matter. Mr. Dalton here has legal claim." Like Pike had legal claim to half the territory, May rode forward, no longer the quiet schoolteacher. "We've seen your legal claims before. They tend to burn easily." "Mrs. Mercer." Corbett's eyes glittered with malice. "Still playing gunfighter, how inappropriate for a schoolmarm." "What's inappropriate?" Colt said quietly. "Is harassment of law-abiding citizens. Sarah Whitehorse's claim to this land is ironclad. I know because I helped survey it myself, years back. That was news to everyone, including May. But Colt's word carried weight. The territorial government had recognized his pre-war survey work as binding. "You'll need more proof than," Corbett began. "Will this do?" May produced a leather portfolio from her saddlebag. "Copies of every land deed in the county, certified by federal authorities after Pike's trial, including the original Whitehorse claim, predating any others by 20 years. She'd spent weeks organizing these documents, creating an unassailable record. Pike's greatest weapon had been confusion-destroyed records, lost papers, uncertain claims. May had made sure that weapon couldn't be used again. Corbett's hired guns looked uncertain now. Fighting a widow's single protector was one thing. Facing the sheriff, a federal ranger, and armed townsmen was another. "This isn't over," Corbett snarled. "There are legal channels." "Yes," Ada agreed pleasantly. "There are. Feel free to use them. In court, with a judge who isn't bought and paid for." Her hand rested on her pistol. "But for now, you and your men will leave, peacefully, while that option remains available." The standoff stretched taut before Corbett gestured sharply to his men. They mounted and rode out, dust and curses trailing behind. Sarah lowered her rifle, shoulders sagging with relief. "May, I didn't expect—" "Family doesn't expect," May said simply. "Family just shows up." The word hung in the air between all of them, family. Not of blood, but of choice. Forged in trial and tempered by trust. They stayed for supper, making sure Corbett's men truly left the area. Around Sarah's table, plans took shape. Legal protections for vulnerable claims, a mutual aid society for ranchers, education programs about land rights. "Change comes slow," Sarah said. "But it comes. My grandmother told me that patience and courage together can move mountains." "Or at least mining barons," Tom added, earning laughs. as they rode home under a canopy of stars. May found herself thinking about time and change. A year ago, she'd been a grieving widow with no future beyond survival. Now, "You're quiet," Colt observed. "Thinking about circles, how things come round." She smiled at him. "That first night, you saved us from wolves. Tonight? Tonight you saved someone else. That's not a circle. May, that's growth." They created a small rise, and dry creek spread before them. Lantern light warm in windows. Their town, their home. Not perfect perfection was for fairy tales, but improving. Getting better by degrees, like spring warming frozen ground. Uncle Colt Wren's voice carried from the schoolhouse where she'd been helping Dr. Chen organize medical supplies. "Aunt May, did you stop the bad men?" Uncle and aunt now, by her choice. Not replacing her father, but expanding her family. May's heart swelled every time she heard it. "We did," Colt called back, "though your Aunt May did most of the stopping." Wren ran to meet them, braids flying. At nearly 10, she was shooting up like a weed. All legs and questions. "Was there shooting? Did you arrest anyone? Can I be a deputy when I'm older?" One question at a time. May laughed, dismounting to hug her girl, their girl. The adoption papers had been signed at Christmas, making legal what Hart had already claimed. Later, after Wren was tucked in bed and the house had settled into evening quiet, May and Colt sat on their new porch. He'd built it wide, with a swing that caught the sunset. Their small house wasn't fancy, but it was theirs, bought with honest money, built with willing hands. "Letter from Fletcher mentioned something else," May said, pulling the evening's mail from her pocket. "A teaching position in San Francisco. Very prestigious, very well paid." Colt went still beside her. "You considering it?" "For about 5 seconds." She laced her fingers through his. "Everything I want is here, everyone I love. But I thought you should know the option existed." "San Francisco's got opera houses," he said carefully. "Museums. Culture. Things Wren might—" "Wren's got 60 acres to run wild on. A horse of her own. Friends who don't care that she's an orphan. Doc Chen teaching her medicine. Ada teaching her to stand strong." May turned to face him. "What do you think matters more?" His answer was in his kiss, deep and certain as mountain stone. When they parted, both breathing unsteadily, he rested his forehead against hers. "Have I told you today that I love you?" "Only twice. You're slipping." "And have that." He pulled her onto his lap, the swing creaking gently. "I love you, May Elizabeth Calloway Mercer, for your courage, your compassion, your complete inability to back down from a righteous fight." Sweet talker. But she was smiling, feeling young and cherished and home. "I love you too, for your steady hands, your patient heart, your terrible coffee that I pretend to like." "You pretend," he tickled her ribs, making her squeal like a girl. "Woman, you wound me." Their laughter drifted across the evening air, mixing with cricket song and the distant whistle of the evening train. The railroad had come through after all, bringing prosperity and problems in equal measure. But the town had learned to handle both, had learned that community meant more than commerce. "It's not the ending I imagined," May said softly. "When I came west with Samuel, when everything fell apart." "No," Colt agreed. "It's better, because it's real, earned, chosen." A coyote called from the hills, answered by another. But the sound didn't frighten now. It was just part of the landscape, like wind and weather. Even wolves had their place, as long as good people stood ready to protect what mattered. The school bell hung just that morning, caught starlight on its bronze surface. Tomorrow it would ring for the first time, calling children to learn. All children, regardless of origin, because May and others had fought for that principle and won. "Look!" Wren called from her window. "Shooting star." They looked up in time to catch the light streaking across the sky. May didn't make a wish. Everything she wanted was already here, the weight of Colt's arms around her. Wren safe in their home. A town finding its way to justice. The untamed frontier was changing. Civilization creeping in with each passing season. But some things endured love that chose to stay. Families that chose each other. Communities that chose to stand together against whatever storms might come. Time for bed, May called to Wren. School tomorrow? Yes, teacher Aunt May. The giggle in Wren's voice made them both smile. They sat a while longer, watching stars appear like scattered seed pearls. Somewhere out there, Luther Pike served his sentence, his empire dust, somewhere. Other May Callaways faced their own storms. But here, now, peace held sway. No regrets, Colt asked quietly. May thought of all the paths that had led here, grief and grace, terror and triumph, loss and love mixing like streams joining a river. Every scar had brought wisdom. Every tear had watered new growth. No regrets, she confirmed, only gratitude. The swing creaked gently as they rocked, two souls who'd found harbor in each other. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, always did, in a land still finding its shape. But tonight was for contentment, for acknowledging how far they'd traveled from that frozen night when hope seemed lost as Samuel's mine. In the house, Wren sang softly to herself, some melody doctor. Chen had taught her. On the porch, Colt hummed along, his voice rumbling through his chest where May rested her head. She added her own harmony, and for a moment their small family made music that rivaled the stars for beauty. This was happiness, May realized, not the dramatic crescendo of storybooks, but the quiet accumulation of good days, breakfast conversations and evening silences, small victories and shared sorrows, a life built board by board, season by season, with hands that knew both work and tenderness. "Thank you," she whispered to the night, to God, to whatever forces had brought them through fire to find this peace. "For what?" Colt asked. "For fighting for us, for choosing us, for being the kind of man who builds swings and schools and futures." He was quiet long enough that she looked up, finding his eyes suspiciously bright. "Thank you," he said roughly, "for seeing something worth saving in a broken-down soldier, for trusting me with your heart and Wren's future, for making me believe in forevers again." They sealed the words with a kiss, soft and sure as spring rain. Inside, Wren's singing stopped, replaced by the steady breathing of a child at peace. Around them, Dry Creek settled into sleep, its struggles not ended but eased, its people learning slowly that justice and mercy could share the same sky. The untamed West was changing, but so were they all, shaped by trials, strengthened by survival, softened by love that chose to stay. It wasn't a perfect ending because life didn't deal in perfection, but it was good and real and theirs. Under the vast Wyoming sky, two people who'd found each other in winter's worst storm rocked gently in spring's embrace, writing their future in courage and contentment, one precious day at a time. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and eternal, but no distant fire burned brighter than the love they'd kindled from the ashes of all they'd lost, a love strong enough to build on, deep enough to trust in, true enough to last through whatever seasons lay ahead. Home, May thought, wasn't a place but a promise kept. And here in Colt's arms, with Wren safe inside and tomorrow bright with possibility, every promise found its yes. Thank you so much for joining me on this wild journey through the untamed frontier. If you enjoyed May and Colt's story of love, courage, and justice in the Old West, I'd love to hear where in the world you're listening from. Drop a comment below, and let's share this campfire together. Don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Night for more tales of romance and adventure where the horizon never ends. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and give it a hype to help other wandering souls discover our little corner of the frontier. Until we meet again under these vast western skies, keep riding toward your dreams, partners.